Hi and welcome to video 4 where we plan your software. Now in the previous video you have created your ordered to-do list. You've already created a to-do list which is 90% of your planning process of the software. So you're almost done, but there are a few things that you need to think about before you actually create the software. And you also need to create a more detailed plan or blueprint so that you can implement the software easier. Now, here are a few things that you need to find out. You need to figure out whether you want to go with a web-based software or a Windows-based software. Now here I want to give you some examples. Web-based software and Windows-based software. Web-based software is easier to create and generally has less bugs because you're dealing with usually PHP, ASP, MySQL databases. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about that. Windows-based softwares are just means that the software runs on your Windows operating system. The difference between the two is web-based you can reach people with different computer types, Windows, Linux, Macintosh. With Windows, you can only reach Windows people. There are limitations on Windows too. Sometimes it's not compatible with newer operating systems, sort of like Windows 7, Vista. Maybe it's only compatible with XP and Vista, and it's not compatible with Windows 7. With web-based software, you lower your costs, and I'll show you in just a minute some examples. So Windows-based software is actually very easy to understand. For example, this software here, CBNITS Builder, is a Windows-based software. You can download the database, find niche products, and then create a website. So that's the Windows-based software. Web-based software is basically anything that runs on a website. So for example, every time you enter a search term through Google, there is a script behind Google or software script that searches Google's database for a specific term that you enter. Or, you have photo editing, online photo editing sites. This is basically a script or web-based script. Of course, keep in mind that whatever you choose to develop, of course, if you want to edit or develop a online photo editing site, then it's going to cost a lot more money versus producing a script that is a lot simpler. But those are just some ideas of web-based versus Windows-based software. Now that you understand the difference between web-based software and Windows-based software, you need to ask yourself, what programming language are you going to use? Well, if you stick with the web-based software, then it's going to be something like PHP, MySQL, or ASP. But I'd highly recommend that you stick with PHP and MySQL. PHP is basically a programming language. MySQL is a database language. So let's say that you would create a script that allows you to keep track of your clientele. The PHP is what people would see, basically the front end. You would be able to enter your clients. The MySQL database would hold the data. For example, the first name, last name, your client information. So that's what MySQL is. ASP is sort of like PHP, but a lot different. It's also web-based software. You can do a few things with it, but I would highly recommend PHP and MySQL. So recommended is that. Windows-based software would be something like Delphi, .NET, Visual Basic. In fact, with the CBNITS Builder product that I developed or had developed, it was created in Visual Basic. I say the downside with Visual Basic is that because it's older type Windows-based software, if you're doing Visual Basic 6, I believe they have Visual Basic .NET. That's a lot better. But if you do Visual Basic, you got to keep in mind that some of the softwares that you create may not work on some of your customers' computers, therefore creating more refunds and more support issues. If I were to create a software again, being that I've created tons and tons of software and I've invested over $40,000 on software, keep that in mind. Everything I produce now is web-based software because it's cheaper. Instead of investing, $4,000 or $5,000 on a web-based, a Windows-based softwares, I'm investing $100 to $200 on a web-based software. But not only that, you lower your costs, you have less bugs, because with Windows-based softwares, I remember with CVNet Builder, I had so many people that were not able to use the software because their computer system may not have contained a specific file that the software needed. So if I were to recommend a Windows-based software, I would recommend Delphi or .NET. Now, all of this might not mean anything to you now, but when you hire somebody to create a program for you, then I would stick with the recommended programming languages. Even if you don't know what they are, now that you understand a little bit about the background, you can successfully approach programmers to develop simple yet awesome softwares. So it depends on what you want to do. But for the most part, I would stick with PHP and MySQL. Some softwares cannot be created unless unless there's Windows, or it's easier to create with Windows, or it's easier to create a web-based software. So you really got to think, what does the software do? If your software does not rely on the internet and you feel like somebody has to run it from Windows, maybe it has to interact with specific programs on your Windows operating system. For example, you were able to create a software that deals with Microsoft Outlook or Microsoft Word, then you would have to create a Windows-based software. But if you think about it and your software does not have to touch any other softwares on your computer, then I would go with web-based software. And not only that, you do have to host the software, which may be a downside, but you get people coming back to your website. So there are advantages and disadvantages to both, but my recommendation from my experience in the software business is to go with PHP and MySQL if all possible, because you lower down your bugs. So what do you need? You need an ordered to-do list, which you learned in the previous video. You're going to need to know whether it's web-based or Windows-based. Of course, you can't move forward if you don't know that. Then you need to know the programming language. If it's web-based, PHP or MySQL. If it's Windows-based, do Delphi or .NET framework. Budget. The reason why I say money plus 50 is because of this. A lot of times, somebody will quote you $100, $50. But what I like to do is generally give them a bonus. And here's why. You never know if you're going to need that programmer in the future, especially to fix any bugs. And you could even say, hey, you could give $50 bonus, or you could leave $50 aside just in case you need to add features. In my line of experience, I have found that over the years that I create a software product, as they are creating the software, I think of these features that can be added onto the software that are vital to probably the success of that initial software product. So keep aside some money just in case you need to invest back to add more features. Now, if you're going to add 10 more features, I would wait. I would not add those features unless they are extremely vital to selling. If you can sell the software product initially, then add the features later, because If you do that, you build a relationship with your customers because they feel like you're constantly adding or updating your software. Then you need to know what time you need it done. If you need it done within 30 days, you need to minus 5 to 10 days. So if you need it done in 30 days, I would normally tell the programmer, hey, I need this done in 5 days. Because 5 days, even though they promise to do it in 5 days, I have found that programmers usually will need an extra week or two. That's 2 weeks. That's 10 or more days, 14 days. So if you need it done in 30 days, make sure that you tell them, I need this in 4 to 5 days. Most of the time it can be realistic. If you get it done, then great. But if you don't get it done, then you have time to work on other things as it gets done. And if you promise people that it's going to get done too early and it never gets done, then of course your credibility goes down. So that's something that you just need to keep in mind.